Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and get started with today's 70DU event. Today, we're going to be talking about critical thinking and analysis, our open class today. We are going to have a lecture followed by time for Q&A, so be sure to prepare your questions during the presentation today. We're joined with a really fantastic teacher today, Amy, who will be teaching us the difference between critical thinking and general thinking and why it is so important to your future studies and for things like standardized tests. Today's event is actually only the first half of our critical thinking and analysis events. Today, we're going to introduce the idea of critical thinking and give some example studies, but next Saturday is when we will hold an official free trial class where you can experience exactly how the real class is going to be like. So students will be expected to have their cameras on and participate actively in class, just like they would if they were taking the full course. And I really highly recommend everyone to register for this follow-up free trial class next Saturday. So I'm sending the links in the chat right now to register. It's the same link, but just one description is in Chinese and one is in English. Yes, I can try to make my screen a little bit larger. Hopefully that helps. But yeah, make sure to sign up for next week's free trial class. Now, before we get started, I'd also like to remind all of our families on this call who have older kids in high school. We know that this spring is a really busy time for high schoolers, and we have a lot of SAT, ACT, and AP courses starting now, as you can see on the right on the PowerPoint. If anyone has any questions about any of these courses, please stick around to the end of today's event to discuss with us, or you can contact us on WeChat or by email. So now let's just get started on introducing Amy. So Amy is one of our most distinguished teachers here at 70DU, having graduated from UCLA, UChicago, and Duke University. From her studies in humanities and law, she has developed a really extensive experience in critical thinking. And with this knowledge, she has become an expert in analyzing college essays and helping students improve on their SAT reading and writing section, as well as things like AP exams, which we all know all of these subjects rely really heavily on critical thinking. So without further ado, Amy, if you're ready, would you like to get started on today's class and share your screen?
Okay, hello. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Anne. So welcome everyone to our critical thinking and analysis open class. So to begin with, I actually wanted to start with a few questions or issues. Okay, so these items here, uh-oh, is there an issue? You cannot hear any sound. Can you hear sound now? Okay, perfect. Great, thank you. So I was just saying, welcome to our critical thinking and analysis open class, and I wanted to get started with a few questions, or some issues, some problems, if you will. So some of the items you see here are common situations that most of us have either heard of or faced. Right, let's look at number one. Why do some kids feel left behind in high school? We all know students like this. They do super well in elementary school. They do very well in middle school. They may even do well the beginning years of high school. But once they hit those honors or advanced placement courses, they start to struggle, right? They feel like they're falling behind. Tests and classwork becomes much more difficult and they just can't keep up. Now, I don't think the reason is study habits or even ability, because as I said, these kids did so well in elementary school and middle school. I would make the argument that it may be something else, right? There could be a skill set that's being fostered or needed here that they may be struggling in. Let's go look at another situation. What about situation about the standardized tests? We also know kids like this, right? For instance, maybe your child is getting an A+ in English class, and yet somehow they are still struggling in the SAT reading section. Or maybe they're getting an A+ in their math course, and yet they still struggle with the SAT math section. Why is that? What is it about these standardized tests that seem different from receiving a high GPA? Right? What skills are necessary that our children must master in order for them to succeed? And then one last one is the one about top colleges, which I'll probably go into a bit more later. And we all know these situations, right? That when we go look at student profiles, sometimes we wonder, why is it that a college will select student A over student B? when their numbers are so similar, right? What qualities and characteristics are they looking for? How can I cultivate these same characteristics and qualities in my child? Right? How can I ensure that they enter their dream school, that they are set up for a successful professional and social life? So I'm not going to give you the answers to these questions right now, but I do think that my presentation answers most of these questions. So, sit tight. I'm sure we'll get through that throughout the rest of the presentation. But first, I actually wanted to start with a story. I hope you guys like stories. So I wanted to start with a story called Pizzagate. You guys might be aware of this. This place took place in 2016, which, as we all know, it is the infamous Trump versus Clinton first election year, right? But this doesn't have anything to do with the election per se. So what happened is, in a hacking attempt, the Sherry, you raised, okay, sorry, apologies. There was a hacking attempt, well, not an attempt, it was actually successful. Someone was able to get hold of Hillary Clinton's political advisor's emails, right? So they got hold of this and then WikiLeaks published it. And what happened is that these emails seemed pretty innocuous, right? It was just, maybe there was some sensitive information, but there was nothing incriminating. And there was no blackmail, there was no actual crime. It seemed like it was just going to blow over. However, what happened is some individuals online got hold of these emails, and they made the claim that these emails had a coded message. I don't know if you're aware of the nuances, but essentially they said the emails had a coded message, and it was proof that these politicians were part of a human trafficking ring, that they were selling people and committing these horrific crimes. And one of their bases of operation was this Comet pizza parlor. And there's a picture of it here, right? They were convinced that this place was where they were selling people. In fact, so many people were convinced. I think it went viral. It was thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that believed it, that one man from North Carolina traveled all the way to this Comet pizza parlor with a gun, and he shot open their basement door because he was convinced he was going to find people there inside. As we all know, this rumor was completely false, right? 100% fabricated. There was no truth behind it at all. But I think looking back at it now, the frightening thing is how many people believed it. And it's not just, weird people. When we think about conspiracy theories, sometimes what we think is only weird people believe that, right? It's like people who don't socialize, they're stuck somewhere. Like clearly it's only these strange people who would believe things like that, right? But unfortunately, because of the way that news is communicated today, because of social media, because of these increasing areas of misinformation, now we have ordinary people believing extremely unordinary, extraordinary, false things. And I think when it comes to students and children, for this new generation, something that worries me is that we need to equip our kids that they're able to handle this, right? We need to teach our children how to evaluate information, how to separate truth from falsehood, how to make these well-informed decisions. For example, my cousin's going off to college this year, a pretty great college, very smart kid, but sometimes she is unable to distinguish between a Twitter thread and an article that's published in the New Yorker, right? She doesn't understand why one would be more perhaps valuable than another. And that worries me, because if we have not trained her enough to make this sort of decision, right, doesn't that mean we haven't fully trained her enough to make the bigger decisions in life, such as what major should I choose, right? What profession should I pursue? What people should I associate with? What are my moral values and beliefs? These are all thought processes. These are all things that require critical thought and evaluation. And I think with this new generation, because of the internet, because of the changing landscape, it's more important now than ever that we give them the tools, right? Because our positions as parents and educators isn't to tell them you must believe this or you must be this, is that we give them the equipment and the tools to make those well-informed decisions by themselves. Okay, so that's story number one. If you're interested in this, I think there's this really excellent documentary called The Social Experiment that goes into it into more detail. Here's story number 2, which is perhaps something that's a bit closer to home. And this is called The Intangibles. This has to do with college applications. Now, everyone knows that college applications care about numbers to a certain extent, right? You need a high GPA. You need good test scores because you're competing against everyone else. And if you want to go to the top colleges, you need to have those numbers. However, we also know it's not just about numbers, right? For instance, this is taken from a profile of what admissions committees will use to judge prospective students. And the things listed here are what we call the intangibles, meaning I cannot quantify it. These are personal qualities and characteristics that colleges look for. Because the truth of the matter is, test scores and grades are important, but they're not enough. Right? Not the unfortunate thing, but as my mom would put it, no college wants to admit someone who only knows how to study, who only knows how to get good test scores. She says it's like Sudaise. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, but it's like you get Sudaise, right? All they know is how to study, all they know is how to get good test scores, but they don't know anything else. They don't have creativity of thought, right? They don't have leadership skills. They don't have social awareness. And it's unfortunate that a lot of Asian American students are stereotyped into it these days. So part of our role as admissions consultants is that we want to break free of that stereotype. Right? We want to present our students in a way that really communicates their promise and their character. But I'm going to tell you a secret because I am an essay consultant and I've worked with students on this. I'm going to tell you a secret about that. And the secret is that we are only able to work with the foundation that is brought us. Right? For instance, if you are trying to build a house, you cannot build a good house, a really architecturally beautiful, appealing house unless it has this strong foundation. Doesn't matter how beautiful your windows are, doesn't matter how ornate your roof is. If you don't have a strong foundation, then that house is going to collapse eventually. It's the same with admissions applications and essays. If a student is socially immature and intellectually immature, because these skills have not been nurtured, right, since they were young, because they were not valued, then there's only so much that parents, that application consultants can do. It is not enough to start the application your junior or senior year and expect some sort of miracle, right? Because we can't change students into people they are not. Instead, the best thing is to cultivate these abilities early, to have them become the best version of themselves, right? So that way they are able to write and communicate these qualities that they have. And it's not just for college. I think we would all agree that a lot of these personal characteristics are important just for success in life, right? For instance, if you go look at some of the most, I think, famous tech entrepreneurs or innovators, you'll notice that a lot of them have these characteristics as well. For instance, Elon Musk. We all know Elon Musk, right? He did SpaceX, Tesla. I think he's trying to colonize Mars. Very smart guy, right? There's this story that people pass around about Elon Musk. I'm not sure 100% if it's 100% true, but I think there's a grain of truth to it. And the story is this. One day, Elon Musk was trying to interview some person, an engineer, for this top engineering position at his company. And this candidate has really, really impressive credentials, right? Top colleges. He had led some really high profile projects, but there was one thing on his resume that stood out. And it was that this person had worked on a pig farm since he was young until his teen years. And the story goes that during that 1 to 2 hour interview, Elon Musk didn't ask him about what college he went to or about his projects. No, he just wanted to learn more about this pig farm. He was like, hey, you worked at this pig farm. Can you teach me more about that? Like, what did you do at this pig farm? What are the nuances of pig farming? How do you breed pigs? Like, what's the goal and the objective? And this may seem odd to some of us, but I think it demonstrates a characteristic that is sometimes lacking in traditional education. And that's just intellectual curiosity, creativity, innovation. But I think that story demonstrates an extreme desire to learn, to innovate, to know more. Now, maybe we're not that ambitious. I don't need my kid to be the next Elon Musk, right? I don't need them to be the next Steve Jobs. But I think we all want to foster that creativity of thought. Because in order to be successful, not just in college applications, but later on in life, we all need to know, how do I make the creative choices, right? How do I think in a way that I am able to identify problems that other people are not able to? How am I able to find solutions that other people have not been able to? And that is not the rigid type of memorization, hitting a checklist, right? Do X extracurricular or take X test. That is a mentality and thinking process that we need to cultivate. Okay, so these are these two stories, and I'm going to argue that both these stories come down to critical thinking. If we want our children to be socially mature citizens, to make well-informed decisions, if we want them to be intellectually mature, to demonstrate that creativity of thought, to have what we actually call intellectual development, then we need to focus on critical thinking starting from a young age, from middle school to high school.